excited and really happy to have Ood here today.
Okay,
So thank you,
so
Peter.
we do have a problem. I didn't look at the screen. I switched things up, and we do have someone breaking in here. And that's Dave. Dave, thanks for pointing it out. We were muted entirely for the whole thing, so
Ah,
we may need to start over completely. So
that's hilarious.
yeah, so we did have a few technical problems before, and that's where I turned off a few things, and I didn't turn them back on. So, and as I said,
Welcome.
we were being sniped by Dave. Dave is in the back room. Thanks, Dave, for helping
Thank
out.
you, Dave. Thank you, Dave.
So, yeah, you did a great introduction that no one heard. You want to recap the introduction
I'll
real
do it
quick?
again. I can probably do it shorter this time. So there you
Okay,
go.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm Professor Flynn. I teach in the humanities at a major research university in the western part of North America. It is at this university, which shall go unnamed for various reasons. It's at this university that I met our guest, Ood. So I'm very happy to talk with him today, and he and I will talk a little bit, I imagine, about how we met. It's kind of funny, but anyhow, I'm a professor in the humanities, brought up in hardcore Catholic upbringing, church every Sunday, prayer meetings, holy water in the house, the whole deal. When I was 9 years old, I was sitting in Mass on a Sunday morning, and I suddenly stopped believing. And the reason that I stopped believing is that I'd been learning in school at the age of 9 about the Greek and Roman gods and goddesses. And as I sat there listening, half listening to the homily and looking at all the statues and Stations of the Cross and the stained glass, all that stuff, I just started to think about, like, wow, we used to think that the sun rising and setting was Apollo driving his fiery chariot across the sky, right? No one believes that anymore. So as a 9-year-old, I thought, wow, we don't believe in the classical, the ancient gods and goddesses anymore. How long can it be really until we stop believing in this nonsense too? So that's when I stopped being a believer. Still got dragged to church every day for the next sometimes every day, but at least once or twice a week, got dragged to church and had to sit there and go through the motions. But I stopped believing at the age of 9, and didn't tell anyone, didn't share it, didn't know that there was such a thing as not believing in God, because where I grew up, and certainly in my family, you believed in God. It wasn't a question. It was, you believe in God. What do you do when you're 9 years old and you stop believing? Well, you keep it to yourself. And I mostly kept it to myself until maybe 5-7 years ago, when I became part of the online atheist community, especially the Twitter atheist community, which is where I met Robert and Robert's band of evildoers, and also many other fantastic people from the online atheist community, and also some horrible people from the Christian apologetics community. So that's me, Professor Flynn, here to
We've
have fun.
we've all been there. Okay, so great introduction. So let's move on to our guest. Our guest for today is Ood. Ood, do a quick introduction of yourself.
Well, yeah, I'm from I guess I'm from part of Canada as well. Yeah, and I met Flynn a few years ago, I think at a university or CFI event. Yeah, we'll nail that down. I was involved in some organizations back then, science advocacy organizations and organizations where atheists and agnostics got together to discuss issues and things like that. These days, I guess I'm running my own entertainment thing. I have a podcast, a Culte Veritatis podcast. You can find that at ovpod.ca if you don't want to remember all that Latin. But it's an eclectic show we do with a few friends, and we talk about mysteries and controversies, and we try and cover things that other podcasts in that genre don't cover, like mental health issues or medical ethics issues. And yeah, we talk about that. But these days I'm working in the realm of harm reduction, which is a way to treat drug and alcohol dependence in the community, kind of a a new, more progressive social way to treat it. But I'm still very much involved in the atheist and agnostic sphere. Like, I think getting out of religion when I was a young man, when I was 17, 18, it was a long road to get to where I am now, but I think it's given me a better basis for like a happier, easier to figure out life. I don't have undue guilt and motivations weighing me down from, some Middle Eastern deity and stuff like that. So I think that getting away from religion has given me a good base to work from, and of course, it's put me in contact with lots of lovely people. I think that's enough blabbing for me, but that's me in a nutshell. Yeah.
Okay, and yeah. So what I got from Flynn is that you're also involved in being an open atheist on a university campus. So I'm curious how that is when on a Canadian university. I've heard terrible stories from U.S. universities, but how is that like in Canada?
I would like I try and describe like the place in Canada where I live as sort of like the Canadian Bible Belt. Now, like I would say the more extreme Bible Belt might be next door to where I live, but we still get it pretty bad here.
Mhm. Mhm.
There's still a good amount of homophobia and transphobia, mostly stemming from from religious issues. There's still a lot of traditional family values that are pushed for like arbitrary reasons because of religious values. And it, I would say the biggest struggle in my life, being an atheist, was my connection with my family. My family was fairly fundamentalist, and they weren't willing to compromise when I wasn't religious anymore. And it was a few years ago that I had to cut them out of my life. And I would say that was
Mm.
the biggest hardship that I had to contain. Now I got a good family of choice that I've kind of built on my own over here, and have good people in my life that I can rely on for a support structure when I need it. But you know, hard choices had to be made.
Mm.
Oh yeah, do we talk? Do we talk to the chat? Is that a thing we do here?
If you see something in the chat that you want to respond to, sure,
Yeah,
that's not a problem.
yeah, Randy, that's a long road out. I'm proud of you.
Huh. Way to go, Ood.
Yeah,
Ood, can I ask? Sorry, Peter. I just
yeah.
want
Go
to
ahead, go
ask
ahead.
Ood Ood to just if you could backfill a little bit more, as much as you feel comfortable. What religious denomination or church did you belong to? You said that you came from a very sort of fundamentalist religious background. So I wonder if you can say a little more specifically what if it has a name, or for all I know, you're in like a micro cult or something. But if you say a little bit about what the specific religion was, and then some of the more fundamentalist bits of its practice and dogma, could you talk about that, Ood?
Yeah, sure. I came from a fairly boilerplate Roman Catholic background.
Same
Um,
here.
oh yeah. So and I went to Catholic school, and they taught very homophobic stuff. Like
Mm-hmm.
any LGBT people that went to my high school, like I'm sure they got a horrible first impression of like who they believe they are. Thanks to the stuff that was being pushed there. It's like if you feel certain things, or if you desire certain things, or if you think you're a certain way, you're wrong because my God says so, and you should feel guilty and repent. Stuff like that. Um, uh, there was a little tinge of something that was strange a few times. When my parents went on vacation, I would stay with my auntie and uncle, and we'd often go to this Bible college in a nearby province. And at that Bible, sorry, not Bible college, Bible fundamentalist church, and they would get us, all the kids, like anybody under the age of 18, stand at the front, and it was a thing in that church to get them to try and speak tongues. And I spent a
Ha.
lot of my summers grounded because I never felt the urge to speak tongues. I didn't know what I was supposed to do, and my auntie interpreted that as me being disrespectful and stuff like that.
Oh, wow. Ood, I just quickly want to add, I was dragged to prayer meetings. My family was involved in the charismatic renewal fringe of Catholicism, which is kind of like Pentecostalism meets Catholicism. And I got dragged to the prayer meetings between the time I was, I don't know, 8 and 12, 13, 14. And as a young kid, I would see these people speaking in tongues at the prayer meetings, and the hand up, the whole, the overpower. And even as a little kid, I was just thinking, dude, there's something wrong with these people. And I don't remember ever being frightened by it, but I can imagine how a lot of kids who are, I guess, a little less jaded than I was as a 9-year-old, that must have been scary in some ways. Did you find it scary? To be put in that position, or was it just fucking annoying?
I think I would describe it as fear and anxiety. I think that like the parts of the year that my parents were home during the summer, I went to Bible camp, and at Bible camp it was kind of one of those break you down and make the kids cry because make them feel guilty for not following Jesus. So I describe it as a type of indoctrination, and through Catholic school and Bible school and just stuff at home, it was very instilled in me that if I lost faith, or that if I started to question stuff, that it was the devil affecting me, that I was failing. I was letting the devil get to me.
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes I wouldn't let my thought process go beyond I don't understand, but maybe the Lord will help me understand one day. And when I was put in a position to speak tongues, and I didn't feel any mysterious language rise to my throat, the only thing I felt was confusion. I just kept on. I just feared that somehow I'd angered God, and He's not letting me access the tongues. And I didn't want to fake
interesting.
it. I didn't want to fake it because the way my auntie described it to me is you got to feel it, and I never felt it. So I had confused guilt most of the time.
Wow, that's interesting because your experience was sort of underwritten by a fear of God. My experience in a similar context was I wasn't even thinking about God. I was afraid of those people. What are they going to do next?
Yeah.
They're obvious. We know that people kill each other in this world, and we know that the people who kill other people are often crazy. And I'm in a room surrounded by apparently crazy people. What the fuck comes next?
Yeah, gulp.
Exactly. Peter, did you want to get back in? Oh, have we lost Peter?
Oh no, he did.
Peter is great at tech stuff today because there's a button right there that I need to press to unmute myself. So I'm probably going to get slain in the side chat for this, but it happens.
Yeah,
I'm getting old. That's what's going on. So
no hard feelings, man.
The part that I never got was the speaking in tongues thing, and I would really like to meet someone someday who actually thinks that is a thing, that they're allowed to speak in a language that they don't get. I also think that in the Bible it means something completely different. It should mean that you can speak in a different language, which the people who actually speak that language can understand and
recognize.
Yes, and so that's the part that I'm not entirely sure.
Well, the thing, and Ood, maybe you would disagree with this or correct this in your experience, but the idea of speaking in tongues, or the technical term is glossolalia, it's the person isn't speaking in tongues at all. It's the Spirit of the Lord speaking through them in a language. They're just the person is just a microphone, right? It's an ecstatic utterance. They have no control over it at all. But how come the people speaking in tongues always sound like vaguely Eastern European or something? They really put a lot of into their speech. I've never heard someone speak in Japanese when they're speaking in tongues, or as you were saying, Peter, in any discernible language. It's just making shit up. A wop babaloo wop a wop bam boom. I mean, that's what it is.
And the what I would say the fun part is, and I'm not trying to be insulting to people who think that it's actually a thing, but the fact is that people who speak in tongues apparently don't understand each other, which should be possible if the Holy Spirit is making all of this happen. At least you should be able to understand what's being talked about, and the people who next to you speak in tongues should understand. That's where I think we can figure out whether or not this is a real thing.
Well, dude, that's way down low on the to-do list, because Christians, I mean, they still got to agree on what their doctrine is. They can't do that. So speaking in tongues is way down on the laundry list, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. But yeah, it is really weird. But it also, it's Ood, it's sad that you had to close doors when you finally came out as a non-believer. Do you think there's any recovery maybe in future to get back in touch with some of the people that you had to leave behind?
I hope so. It was just at a standstill where neither of us were willing to compromise. Like, I didn't want to pretend to go to church to appease them, and they didn't want me to pretend to believe to appease them. They fear for my mortal soul. They think they're pulling out the big guns because they think if they don't save me, that my soul is going to be tortured for all eternity. So that's why they're playing hardball with me, wanting me to come back to the religion. But I also don't want to compromise towards them. I don't know. I believe in living as authentically as I can, and I would never want to fake a belief system for years and years on end to appease people. So I'm hoping that maybe they'd be willing to compromise in the future. Maybe we can let bygones be bygones, and kind of not speak of it and just be together. But maybe that'll happen. I hope so.
How long ago did you come out as an atheist to them, Ood?
Oh,
how old were you, I guess?
We've had a lot of back and forth over the year. They found out about it when I was, I think 20, maybe 23. It was actually the article about the Hug an Atheist charity that that outed me to them, because I think the local paper wrote up about it, and they read in the paper that I was the ringleader for that thing. So, yeah, big surprise, Mom and Dad. But yeah, we've had some back and forth over the years. So that they found out about it when I was 23, about 7 years ago, I figure. And yeah, it was just a couple years ago that we had the final confrontation kind of thing.
But yeah, this is what it is. I would like you to talk a little more about the Hug an Atheist thing, Ood, because that's, I think, how we first met. I was walking through this corridor at my university where the student groups set up shop and stuff, and I didn't know you and you didn't know me, and I actually still know your sister better than I know you, because she actually took one of my courses. And she's great, by the way. So say hi to her for me if you're still talking to her. But I was walking down this corridor, and all the various bake sales and stuff, and then there's this a table with Hug an Atheist. So I walked right up to you and gave you a hug. And what you, as you said, kind of got outed from doing that. What was it like to be openly atheist on campus? I mean, even to set up that table is a somewhat courageous act, because, dude, there's not a lot of atheist tables sitting around the student clubs these days. So what made you, I referred to you in talking to Peter before this conversation. I referred to you as an activist in that sense. So if you accept that term, what is it that led you to want to be sort of face forward and to be actively activist about your atheism?
I suppose that I wanted something that was approachable and something that was beneficial. Like, not many people can talk shit about Doctors Without Borders. Like,
Right.
it's well, I suppose there's always somebody who can, but their goals and what they're trying to do in the world is pretty agreeable to most people. Like, trying to vaccinate people who don't receive it, trying to provide medical care to people who might not be able to get it. So I knew I wanted to raise money for them, and I wanted to raise money on behalf of the student atheist group, and I wanted to perhaps challenge people's perceptions. And I also knew that people love a hook, like, and that includes me. Like, I'm a sucker for a good hook. Like, I'm a marketer's wet dream, because, like, if it's got a clever hook, I'll throw my money at it. And I think some, like, social movements and some things like charity are much the same. Like, if I were to set up a table in the tunnel there, and I were just to say collecting money for Doctors Without Borders, I'm sure I would have raised some money, but I don't think I would have raised the same amount. And everybody knows how to hug. Very little training needed. So that was kind of the idea I threw together, and I put together a menu of hugs, and it included like all different levels of donation that people wanted to put in. I think I even had like a $50 like all expense paid hug pass, where for the 3 days we were there, you could hug us as much as you wanted, any hug on the menu, if you donated $50. And we had Christian side hugs, and we had like hover hugs, and we had a bear hug where, like, if I was feeling strong that day, I'd pick a person up and give them a few slaps on the back and all that. And they were all different prices, and people really liked it. Like, we've seen the same people multiple times a day buying hugs, and by the end of it, I think we raised $21 over 10,000. So I think
that's amazing.
Oh yeah, I think by the end we $10,021 for 3 days of selling hugs. Yeah, and it was. Oh, thank you.
Amazing.
I never expected it.
I thought you made like $200 or something. That's incredible.
Yeah. I never expected it to take off, and like there was people from like global news coming to film the hugs, and yeah, it really. I didn't know if it would work. Like, sometimes with some of my side projects, I don't know if it's a dumb idea until I'm halfway through it, and like I kind of had that feeling with this as well. But like it really took off.
Awesome. I'd started, but I don't think anyone wants to hug this. I'm probably not going to bring in that amount of money. But
I was going to say the same thing about myself.
Yeah, it's a serious amount of money. And I love the entire idea with coming up with different kinds of hugs, and then different tiers as well. So that is amazing. I mean. But so you mentioned your podcast earlier, and I did check the link, and I clicked for a few seconds. So the way your podcast starts out, I'm assuming there's a lot of humor involved, because the introduction is awesome. If people want to check it out, I posted both the link to your Twitter account and to the podcast in the description of the video, so people can go check it out. So can you tell us a bit about the podcast that you're doing, because that seems like an awful lot of fun to me.
It's great, by the way. It's fantastic, Ood.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's another one of my like half-baked ideas that sort of took off. Basically, I have 3 friends, and it was people that I met through an organization in the city here. I think it's an international organization. Center for Inquiry. It's a science advocacy organization, and we all met there. So we kind of all had a basis of people being like skeptical and curious. And really, I met those people maybe some of them like 8-10 years ago, and I've been friends with them ever since. And since then, we've seen each other through divorces and mental breakdowns and all kinds of disasters, and we've seen ourselves at highs and lows. And through that process of just becoming closer friends, we found that we could be like way too honest with each other. Like if we were having a bad day, we would say like, yeah, you know, I bet on a fart and lost, and I ruined my pants this morning. Like there was no like. There was no walls up between.
No punches pulled. Yeah.
Yeah, and plus we were all interested in like we were all curious people because we were all involved in CFI, and we're all like skeptical people, and we've all given like presentations before, like in different organizations. So we thought that it would be good to like throw together a podcast about things we want to talk about, and the basic format is that. Every month, we all show up with one subject and we present it to everybody else. And sometimes it's been like, medical ethics issues. A member of our podcast has electroshock therapy on a regular basis, which is a scary thing to conceive of. It seems like very medieval torture-ish, but through the episode, we go through the procedure and we kind of like destigmatize it and educate. And we try and do that with a bunch of stuff. We go into silly shit like we did an episode on sex dolls throughout history about like in like old pirate ships in the 1500s, like them constructing wooden and leather dolls and stuff like that. And then we cover like serious issues. Like we did an episode on sex and gender diversity. We did at the end of Trump's term, we all felt motivated to like put a stamp on just what this fucker did over 4 years. So we did like, I think we did like can we swear on the show, by the way?
Yeah.
Fuck no.
Okay.
Yeah, it has happened. So yeah,
it has happened.
Good. Yeah, and we did a 4-part Trump episode to try and like capture him. And even just like little annoyances of ours or like little interests of ours, like covering cryptocurrency and stuff like that. But we always try and bring it back to a relatable place and a moral place. Like so we try and lure people in with the catchy, provocative topics, and then try and leave them with some education and a lesson in the end.
One of the things that, and I have listened, I'm not going to say that I listen to every episode. I've listened to a lot though. And one of the things that really impresses me is I can see why you only do one a month, because you guys put a lot of work into the content that you deliver in each episode. It's obvious that like these aren't just three fools sitting around. Like I'm looking at the Haunted Dolls 2-parter right now. This isn't just a bunch of fools saying, "Oh, I remember my grandpappy telling me." It isn't that at all. Like you guys actually do the heavy lifting so that you can, as you say, present these ideas and talk about the controversies and the specifics of them in a way that is, you said relatable, I'd say user-friendly, right? You're not pitching it like way over everyone's head. All the information is there, but it settles very nicely into one's lap, I find.
Oh, yeah. And like, it's a gift and a curse because the four of us were involved in skeptical organizations before, and because the four of us are sort of used to like reading papers and interpreting stuff in a skeptical way and doing critical thinking. Like it's a gift and a curse because like none of us can be lazy on our research because the other three will call us out on it.
Right.
So,
right.
And like if we talk some bullshit, the other three are going to call us out on it. And if you listen to the podcast, you'll hear call outs live because sometimes our research isn't perfect and all that shit. But
well, you know.
Oh yeah.
Whose is?
Oh yeah, but yeah, we put a good amount of effort in. I guess I often tell people to go ahead and like search for other things to educate themselves further if the subject interests them.
Mhm.
But I always try and think if this episode is the only exposure to the subject they get, I
Mm.
want them to get a good view of it to walk away with.
That really comes through. Wow, awesome.
Yeah.
And so and have you had responses to the podcast? Because I'm asking because
It's
we
pretty
do these
successful.
shows and I do get emails from people. So what's the responses you get?
Yeah, like we've had an after show after each episode for a while now, and a lot of them are viewer feedback. Like when we ask for people to write in and give their comments on episodes, like we'll often receive like a bunch of emails we'll have to sort through. And it seems like people really have taken to the podcast. Like we don't really know what we're doing. We're not marketers. We're not business people.
Yeah.
People seem to like us when people stumble across us on
Mm.
whatever service we're on. Like a lot of times they seem to stick around, and like we've gotten up to 500,000 downloads just through
Yeah.
like word of mouth and stuff like that. And we're starting to work with different sponsors and stuff like that.
Mm.
Which is exciting. None of us know what to do with the success, but we also formed like a little Discord community where people meet up and talk about things. And honestly, it's very enlightening. Like a lot of times podcasting, and I'm sure you guys have seen this. A lot of times, like creating content feels like shouting out into the void. But like it really motivates us when the void shouts back and gives us feedback
Yes.
and participates in chats and emails us and all that stuff. So and also like we've built an audience that likes what we do. So we've built like a very
Mhm.
skeptical, like smart audience. Like there's people in our audience that are like way smarter than me, and like it intimidates me to cover some episodes because I know they're listening, but that also like
Yeah.
motivates me to like just do like make sure my research is on point that much harder.
Oh,
Dude, welcome to my world. I'll say this really quickly, Peter. Welcome to my world and the world of any prof who thinks about this at all. It's always kind of nerve-wracking because no one knows everything. But I always say to my students all the time, like, to me, a class is a failure if I don't learn something during that class. So at some point, and you do a great job of it. Maybe it's the Canadian humility gene or something, but I don't mind being corrected. I'm like, oh well, shit, I didn't know that. There you go.
and it's also
and that comes
helpful
through.
if you have people in the chat that are smarter on certain subjects than you are.
Yeah.
I mean, happens to me all the time. It's I'm not the smartest
Get better.
person on the planet,
Yeah.
but you in time you stand on the shoulders of giants. You get the feedback from the people who are listening, and so several of those have ended up being good friends, and at times even co-hosts on the show. When I need to talk about a topic like evolution, I know a little bit, but Jackson Wheat knows a lot more than I do, so I will bring in
Yep.
Jackson Wheat. And quite recently, I had a chat with Cy Gart on Jackson Wheat's channel where I was producing the show. And Cy Gart said, well, if you ever get a Christian on and you want me as a co-host on evolution, reach out. I'll be more than happy to do it. So those are the things that are helpful, and that is where you can get the feedback and actually work with that and have people correct you. It's how we learn. I mean, as Flynn said, no one knows everything, so there's always going to be something
Yep.
you're not
Always.
aware about, and having people follow you and then pointing it out, and that has, at least on our channel, has been the most difficult thing. If I tell people leave a comment in the chat, and preferably some constructive criticism, because we want to learn, we want to do better, then people will send me a private message and say, well, I'm not going to do that because that looks like criticism, and that would look bad if we do it. No, it doesn't. It
Bring
is
it on.
literally how we learn. If you think that we can do better on a specific subject or in a specific way, like making sure to unmute everything before you start a show, throw it out there. I mean, that is how we learn, and that's how we can do better, and it's to everyone's benefit, I think.
Well, Peter, when Ood was talking about this earlier about the friends with whom he put together the OV podcast, Ood, I don't know if you saw the episode. It was I was in your seat, Ood, like last month sometime, and I was the guest with Peter and our friend Robert Reed. And we got, I think you'll remember this, Peter, we got on to the question or the discussion point of why it is that people in our community are eager to correct one another all the time so as not to have our fellow non-believers, embarrass themselves or, say something untoward or whatever. And we lamented that this doesn't seem to happen as much in the Christian apologetics community, that they don't correct one another enough. Yeah. And Ood, when you were talking about your group, you talked about it in exactly the same way we talked about our group last month, that, we can correct each other. We can be apart from each other for 2.5, 3 years and come back together, divorces, deaths, loony bin, whatever. Yeah. Is that a property of the skeptic?
Well, I have
the skeptical mind or something?
I have to add one thing. So some do correct each other, but they think they should do that behind the screens where no one notices.
Right. Yeah.
I think that shouldn't be the case. If you screw up, then do that in public, and that shouldn't be a problem whatsoever.
Screw up in public, fix it in public,
exactly.
Apologize in public, do it all publicly.
Yeah, yes, that's where I am.
I wonder if that's a bit of like traditionalism leaking into like interpersonal relationships. Like, I wonder if people in more like fundamentalist relationships, or I guess like are more fundamentalist themselves, whether they adhere to like, we don't talk about our problems, like we don't, like it's rude to like tell another person they're wrong in front of people, like those like old school values. I wonder if those are pushed like harder in more fundamentalist relationships. But once you get under the guise of like God doesn't exist, and you begin to question like all the traditionalism that goes along with believing in God, I wonder if it opens you up to like wanting to be corrected because suddenly you care about truth,
Right. I like the way you put that, Ood. Sort of anchoring it in traditionalism, and I think I agree with that. I'd have to think about it a lot more closely, but instinctively it sounds about right. But I would say, and these two things are obviously not mutually exclusive. It's either like the positive influence of traditionalism, or the negative influence of a lack of critical thinking ability.
Yeah.
And that's a big, because if you start to think critically, you can get past traditions. Shit, I did it. If I can do it, anyone can do it. But if you have never had that ability, the critical thinking ability nurtured in you, or if you've never even really been introduced I've taught a graduate seminar full of PhD students. One of them was a student from China, and she was plenty smart and all that kind of stuff, but she had been raised in pretty strict, no independent thinking land. And so one of her problems when we discussed texts and articles, essays about theory and stuff like that, she could tell it all back to you, but she couldn't critique it. Like she couldn't pull it apart. And it wasn't that she was smart enough. It's that she was taught you receive and accept whatever you're given to listen to or read or whatever. And that even as intelligent a person as she wasn't able to do that because she'd been sort of prohibited from employing her critical thinking skills. That is, I don't know if that's child abuse or abuse of some sort, but I don't like it very much.
Yeah, it seems like my instinct there is to say that like it seems like some of her individuality has been like zapped
Yeah.
away from her. Like if she didn't have those pressures put upon her, she could decide for herself how to discern different pieces of like media and how to critique things easier. But it sounds like she's like subconsciously she's waiting to be told like what she thinks.
Told what to think.
And that seems like somebody has stolen the chance for her to come up with her own opinions of it, you know?
Oh, you made it sound even sadder than it already was, Ood.
Sorry.
But I think you're right.
I think it's something that, like, once you get out from under those pressures, like, can be unlearned, though. Hopefully.
Have you turned any of your... I shouldn't put it that way, maybe, but in your conversations with your believing friends, have you, and you know, I don't even think that any of us should try to deconvert someone or whatever we're calling it now, but have you felt any of your friends swaying a little bit in your conversations with them, or that's just, you know, you don't even discuss it anymore because you'd rather be friends?
I've noticed that sometimes. Like, I don't try and confront as much unless, like, I see negative consequences on the outcome. Like, if I see somebody start to, like, judge somebody else for a religious reason or something like that, sometimes I'll confront them. And I never usually hear them sway, like, in the conversation. It's like the next conversation, suddenly they're, like, a couple pegs on the wooden board over.
Right.
Like, it seems like I'm pretty good at talking to people. Like I guess that's the one that's the one thing that I'm fairly good at. Like I work in a social work realm, right, too. So I talk to people a lot, and I'm usually able to connect with people and like communicate with them pretty successfully. But like I haven't been able to move many people within the conversation. It's always like I have to wait for them to reflect on it in private before they'll feel comfortable moving over. And I think even people that are swayed, people that are swayed will sometimes like stubbornly like adhere to the same arguments, like even if they don't believe it anymore, just because of their pride. But like I guess with my inner group, like with the people that I'm close to, like I can sway them, like if they legitimately think I'm right, like it's pretty easy to sway them. Like it's more of a like, oh, I didn't know that, like than like a defensive reaction.
Right, because the defensive reaction is the one that, you know, usually we get, even if we're not, you know, I've never tried to convert any or deconvert anyone. But Peter, I think I may have told you this one time. I had a very annoying student years ago when I was teaching in Montreal, and she came to my office hours to discuss her essay assignment or something. And we had, in that class, we had actually been discussing a novel that's about speaking in tongues, and a person who has this religious, she knows she's supposed to be having a religious experience when people speak in tongues, but she basically has the experience that you and I have had, which is, what the fuck is going on? But this student, so we've been reading that thing, and I never tell my students that I'm an atheist. Although they can probably infer it from some things that I say, but you know, it's just like I'm not a Marxist, but I wouldn't say I'm a Marxist or a socialist, whatever. Anyhow, this incredibly annoying student showed up at my office, and she starts to get like her notebook out of her and her laptop out of her backpack. And then she gets out these pamphlets, and I get a glimpse of them. And the top one is, so you're turning to Christ or something like that. And her name was Karen. And Karen said, before we talk about my essay, I'd like to talk to you about how Jesus is, and this is the way she said how Jesus is really cool and he could be like a really cool part of your life. And I looked up at her and I said, I remember it exactly. I said, Karen, please put those pamphlets away, because I can assure you that if there's one person in this room who's in danger of being converted, it isn't me. So she packed it up, and that was that. And that's really the only discussion I've ever had with a student about atheism. So they don't know, but they can infer that I am that. Have you, Ood, in your classroom time, have you ever been in a class that moved into a discussion of religion or theism or whatever, in which you felt comfortable speaking in front of a class, which is a very different social context than being in like the tunnel with all the student groups, right? In the class, there's a kind of hierarchy thing going on. Have you ever spoken up or wanted to speak up and then decided not to for fear of, I don't know, outing yourself or something? What was your experience in the classroom with your atheism, Ood?
I think the one event that stands out in my mind was at an intro to anthropology class that I took. And the teacher was talking about the history of humans in writing, and about just how many years ago we've been able to record like humans writing. And I think the earliest we have is from Sumar, metal plates engraved with things, I think. But somebody from the class spoke up, and I suspect that she was probably like raised in a fairly sheltered environment, maybe, and it was Anthropology 101, so like a lot of us were first year students, and she was talking about like that doesn't make sense, like the Earth is only 6,000 years old. And the professor tried to get the class to move on, but with saying like, some people believe that, but for this class we're going to go with this information, because this is the information that's been like studied and reported upon, like stuff like that. And this person wouldn't let it go, and she wanted the professor to admit that she had a point. Like, how can this be? And like I would say a friendly argument. Like I could see that she was fairly like worked up, and I didn't want to upset her further.
No, yeah.
So I tried with like a deft hand to like talk with her about like, we have all these examples of humans existing further. Like we have burial mounds in Iceland of humans burying their dead that go further back than 6,000. We have different forms of humans, and she just would not let it go. And eventually the professor pretty much had to do the whole like, okay, we're all just gonna stay quiet, and I'm gonna continue with the class.
Move on.
Yeah. And I think that was the biggest incident in my mind. And I suppose like a few like history of English classes, like there was a talk about a Lord's Prayer in a history of English classes, where the professor was sort of starting to preach a little bit, like,
moving from textual interpretation to proselytization,
a little bit. And I wasn't as confident back then as I am now, so I didn't speak up, but I felt like I should have been I should have been the person to say like, hey, this is like inappropriate, like you definitely have like Muslims and and agnostics and Sikhs and people of different religions here, like there's like, why are we pushing like strictly Christian stuff? Like it's sort of not the place in university ever. But I didn't end up speaking up.
Yeah. Well, there was potentially a price to pay for doing so, right?
Here's where I want to take up a tiny cue, because you mentioned Muslims. So a friend of mine is in the side chat, and up until 3 months ago he was an atheist, and then he converted to Islam. And I do want to say this. He reached out to me a couple of days ago to have a chat, so I'm really looking forward to talking to him again. And I've not talked to him for a long time, so thanks for reaching out. But he has a question that he wanted to ask to you, Ood, and that is, can the guest give a summary of his principles of his epistemology that conjoins with critical thinking on a metaphysical level?
I guess, like, I don't know, like I said, I'm a very layman type guy. I don't know if I can speak the level of philosophy that he wants me to, but I consider myself an agnostic atheist. I don't think I can prove God doesn't exist any more than I can prove that there isn't a teapot circling the sun. But I haven't seen any outward evidence of God's existence. So I don't believe in God, and I act as if he does not exist at this time. That's why I would consider myself an agnostic atheist. Maybe something will come in the future that'll change my mind. I don't know what that is, but I haven't seen any proof that satisfies me to any degree that a God exists, even though philosophically I cannot prove he doesn't exist, or they don't exist, I suppose. I don't know. Does that answer it?
I think that's a good summary. That would also pretty much be my answer. Although I would go as far as saying that I might be an agnostic atheist to some of the gods that have been proposed. Other ones, I would consider myself a Gnostic atheist, because if you have a religious book that either contradicts itself or contradicts what we know through science, then if a god supposedly either inspired or wrote the book, then that god can't exist, because now he's contradicting what with reality, and so that god couldn't exist, at least from where I stand, in my opinion. So, Flynn, want to chime in on this?
Well, yeah, I just want to say that, and I say this, I'm going to start off in a very tongue-of-cheek way by saying, as the most educated person in the room, which I think I am right now, I want to salute Ood's profession of his ignorance in some way. And I'm saying this all in scare quotes, Ood, because I think that I certainly, I throw no shade at people who roll out, oh my God, they roll out Hume and whoever, or the William Lane Craigs of the world. Like, hey, dude, you got an education in philosophy. That's great. But to come at it from, as you called it, Ood, the layman's perspective sort of thing, you understand the ideas. You just maybe don't have all the fancy terminology of, a professional philosopher. And I want to defend your not just the validity, but the value of your perspective when you're speaking, as a way of, so I want to validate and value that as a way of validating, valuating, and valuing myself as a 9-year-old sitting in church who stopped believing and had none of the philosophical apparatus to explain epistemology. I never heard that word when I was 9, I assume. But we can know things without going to school for them. So all the people who sort of mock me, like, oh, professor, I bet, like it's a big deal or something. One of the great things about being a professor is you learn a lot of things, you learn how to do a lot of things, and hopefully you learn when you don't know something and to turn to the people that do. And not all the people who know things are people with PhDs. One thing I did want to tag on to that is, Ood, when I first met you, and you, I think maybe it was the time the hug table was the second time I met you, or maybe this all happened at the same time, and you probably won't remember this part. But the table, there was a table set up in that corridor, and It had the signboard said something like, "Tell us what you think about God," or something like that. Like, it was a very sort of generic sort of thing. It wasn't advocating for a position. And this will tell you how long ago this was. This is back in the day when there was a YouTuber and phone-in show asshole who went by the name of Shock of God.
Oh, yes.
And so I went up to you, Brandon, and I know this was the first time, the first time I met you. His line was always, "What proof and evidence do you have that atheism is
correct,
is accurate and correct?" So I went up to Ood at this table, and I said, I sort of tried to act indignant. I said, "Well, what proof do you have? What proof and evidence do you have that atheism is accurate and correct?" And Ood's response was, "Shock of God? Is that you?"
Yeah.
And so like, we bonded. So now, like, I never see or hear about Shock of God anymore.
On a side note, I emailed Shock of God several times back when he still had an email address on his channel, and I think he had a website too. He never responded, but he did keep making videos where he said, "Atheists are afraid of me. They don't want to talk to me." I really wanted to talk to him, but he never responded. I invited him to come on. No reply.
So yeah, that's him, and he was so annoying, and it just struck me, maybe they're the same person. The current Shock of God substitute is this Darth Dawkins guy, who asks a similar question to Shock of God's, "What proof and evidence do you have that atheism is accurate and correct?" Darth Dawkins's script is what other than God is fundamentally absolute and non-contingent that instantiates, our current reality. He just asks this again and again and again and again. It's just a different spin on the same bullshit. And I wonder, Ood, well, ask this a different way. When Peter and Robert Reed and I were talking last month, Robert made what I thought was an excellent distinction that I hadn't heard anyone make before. And what Robert said is that he can have conversations with Christians, no problem. You can be hard-ass Christian. Robert's good to have a conversation with you. But he draws a distinction between Christians and Christian apologists. And Robert's hypothesis is that it is virtually impossible to have an honest conversation with Christian apologists like Darth Dawkins or Shock of God or whoever. So, Ood, I just want to ask you what you think of Robert's distinction between Christians and Christian apologists, whether you think it holds up to scrutiny as much as you can say, sort of as I'm putting you on the spot, and how much at all you even bother to talk with Christian apologists.
I'm still a glutton for punishment. Like, to this day, I'm still a member of several Facebook groups where the whole purpose is to argue with theists. And once in a while, when I'm feeling combative, I go in there and I have a few arguments. And I think I agree with his assessment. Like, I think your average Christian is actually fairly amicable and fairly bendable, and will, like, for the sake of argument, like, take points upon, and like when I have a conversation with them, I'll do the same. I'll take, like, I'll say, for the sake of argument, let's say that's true, and they're all right with that. But there's a different sort that I would almost describe it as media trained, but they're not media trained. They've just been they've been in those spheres long enough, and they've watched other apologists long enough that they have, like, a canned response to, like, every objection. I relate it very much to people who push multi-level marketing schemes, because when you say, like, isn't this a pyramid scheme? Like it's 9 levels down. Isn't everybody on Earth involved? When you confront them with that, they've already been told responses to those objections. So it's almost like playing chess, except like the chess isn't like playing by any rules or anything like that. And
Right.
I think I get what he was talking about with that, because yeah, like I said, there's people that are amicable, and there's people that are almost like have canned responses to classic like rebuttals to their arguments, and they'll just lead you down like whatever dialogue tree they want you to, kind of thing.
So here's a question to follow up, and I'm sorry, Peter, I don't mean to monopolize, but this follows perfectly from what you just asked.
You're good. We're equal co-hosts, so there's no rule on who can talk more.
You're very kind, Peter.
Okay.
My question for Ood, and Peter, I'll ask you too, because I've never asked you this. Ood, you were talking about the canned responses, and we've heard them all. You know, Romans 3:15 or whatever. Fuck you. But what I want to ask is, and now I made that stupid aside, and now I can't remember. Right, about the canned responses thing. Ood and Peter, do you ever find yourself? Excuse me. I don't have the plague. Ood and Peter, do you ever find yourself conjuring? I hope so. Do you ever find yourself leaning on, because the atheist side has its own sort of aphorisms too, right? The sort of boilerplate stuff, all of the very good Sam Harris lines that we've all used a million times. Do you ever start to fall back on one of those atheist canned sayings, or contemplate using it and then make the decision like, okay, I'm going to say it because I'm going to say this thing like, to Ray Comfort, hey, Ray, the bananas that we eat actually have evolved thanks to us. Do you ever find yourself starting to fall back or lean into an atheistic canned response and just say no? Or do you say, I'm going to go with it. What the hell? It's the easiest way to communicate.
I think this.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the subject. I think the subject that I would do that most readily is probably like evolution versus creationism.
Yep.
Like I said, like something else I like to do is I like to bathe myself in like the arguments I disagree with, just to see if I can empathize and see where the other side is coming from. And because of that, like I've watched every single one of Kent Hovind's debates.
Me too, many times.
Like as much as I don't like what he's selling, he's charismatic. He's like the greasy used car salesman of creationism. And he has so many good lines and tricks, but like a lot of the evolutionary professors and a lot of like the atheists that he debates also have a lot of like good lines and good debunks to his stuff. Right. So like I've often been adapting those and sometimes word for word copying arguments against Hovind, against like other creationists online. Like I said before, like I'm not as well versed in philosophy, so I can't really have like very deep like philosophical debates about the existence of God. But I did go to school for biology for a while, so I do have sort of a basis to do some, evolutionary biology debate. So I think in terms of dialogue trees on our side, I think that I would do some like evolutionary debate versus creationism ones.
That's a fantastic answer. Yeah. That's a very good answer.
I think the only thing that I fall back on, which is probably a thing that is coined by Aron Ra, is that I'm an epistemist and I reject faith as the most dishonest position to take when it comes to figuring out what is true and what isn't. And I like it, Ood, that you just said those things about Kent Hovind, because the very reason this channel exists is Kent Hovind. I stumbled onto a video of his, and that's where I thought I need to push back on this. And that's where the name comes from. I needed a name, so I thought, well, I'm going to go for it and see if I can make a difference, and that's where the name GonnaGoForIt came from.
I know.
And I would agree with you that he's a guy who has charisma, and I think a lot of people underestimate that. And it is how he can woo his audience. Sure, his jokes are decades old, but there are apparently still people who haven't heard those, so they seem to work for him. But
dude, his jokes are so old they disprove a young Earth.
Yes,
they're more than 6,000 years old.
I mean, yeah. So that's a good point. By the way, that's a really good point.
Thank you.
But no, but I do think he comes across as being really confident in his position, and it is something. If you watch his debates, and especially if you watch his debates with some professors, they won't be when they're talking, it looks like they're less confident. They would like I'm doing now, use a lot,
right?
And it looks like they
because
they
they
need
don't
to
have a
think.
script.
I think the best one that I've seen, and I keep forgetting the guy's name, is the guy who confronted him with the skulls. He pretty much mocked him during the entire debate, and Hovind never figured out that was going on. And I don't know if AJ Atheist Jr. is still in the chat. We agree on that being the best debate, because he literally went through Hovind's bookstore and summed up. So this person thinks that skull is an ape, and you sell his book. But then you've got a very fine book on creationism written by such and such who thinks that it's a human. Then we've got a book from someone else who thinks that he had 4 skulls, and he had literally 4 books in his bookstore that had all the 4 possibilities that you could take. So either both were human, either both
I
were
remember
ape.
this now. Yeah.
And that was the only one that I've seen who was so confident. And at some point he literally cried and said, I'm going to convert to young Earth creationism because you've convinced me with every. The guy was perfect.
Yeah.
But and that would be,
yeah,
and that would be my only objection to some people debating Hovind, because I've seen atheists, and I've seen atheists who have been public for a long time, have their own channels, and I've seen them lose the debate to Hovind just because
dude, he has them over the barrel, because not only does he have a script, but he has been through that script hundreds of times. So you can't, I don't even think I agree, like he can seem to be pretty charming. Like when he does the trick that he does with, he shows the kids at one of his talks, like how to, if you put an elastic band on your thumb and shoot it, that if you twist it a bit, it will go for like, and that's something that actually, look at, he's engaging and stuff. But once he gets into the script and he gets burning, and anything that his debate opponent can say, he knows his script so well. He's like an idiot savant in a way. Like he'll be asked a question by the biologist he's debating, and then he'll say, well, let's look at slide 147. Now look here, in slide 147. So he knows his stuff so well, he can always, instead of thinking quickly, he can remember quickly what he needs to produce to counter whatever has just been said to him. And look, most profs, certainly outside of the humanities, are not great public speakers always, and they don't understand. You guys both invoked sort of marketing. People in my line of work often aren't very good at selling things to their audience, or at least to an audience of their peers, I guess. And I would just say this, and Kent Hovind is, there's this cliche. He's a dumb person's idea of a smart person, although it kind of fits him. But I would put Kent Hovind and Ken Ham side by side and say, okay, well, they both believe nonsense, but I think Ken Ham is actually intelligent. He just happens to believe. I think that Ken Hovind gives the appearance, he knows things. He knows his script. He knows what he's bought into all his life. He knows the dogma. I don't think that Kent Hovind could survive a debate on his feet, no slides, no text, none of that. There's no way he'd walk out of that alive, because I really believe, I assume we've all seen his doctoral thesis, such as it is.
Oh, yes.
With the classic first line, hello, my name is Kent
My
Hovind.
name is Kent Hovind. Yeah.
Right. It's like the episode of The Simpsons where Homer sends this horrible letter to his boss, Mr. Burns, and calls him, you smell like an elephant's butt, says all these things and puts it in the mailbox. Then he realizes, holy shit, I'm going to get fired. So he goes to the post office to try to get the letter back. And he says, hello, my name is Mr. Burns. I believe you have a letter for me. And the post person says, okay, what's your first name, Mr. Burns? I don't know. And that's Ken Hovind. Hello, I'm Ken Hovind, and I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I do think he's so practiced in his style. Like he has his little slide changer in his hand, and his hand has grown a groove in it from having it in his hand for 30 years.
Yes.
And, I think if you put him in an Oxford style debate with no PowerPoint and all that, I don't know how well he would do. But yeah, I guess to speak to earlier, it's an uphill battle for people on our side, because a lot of people that believe in creationism, they're not all that concerned with truth. They're just concerned with what sounds like truth. So
Yes.
not only do we have to win the logical battle, well, god damn it, now we got to win the rhetorical battle. That's an extra thing we got to do to win hearts and minds, that the other side, we have to fight two battles, while the other side necessarily doesn't have to fight those two battles all the time. Not only do we have to be logically correct, we have to be rhetorically successful enough, be able to express our ideas to people successful enough that we can seem more likable or more convincing or more confident than the other guy. And that's a tall order to thrust towards some PhDs that maybe got the call last week, hey, do you want to debate Hovind? Yeah.
Have you ever, Ood and Peter, you too, I don't know if you've ever seen this. So my introduction to Sam Harris was, and really in a way my introduction to sort of online atheism, 10 years ago, was there's a Sam Harris YouTube video called Sam Harris Fearless Amongst Peers. And it is a mashup of about 20 minutes of him. And this was Sam Harris before he was really well known. He had just published, what's his first book? The one that won the Penn Award. Where are you, Sam Harris book? I can't see it. It'll come to me in a minute. Anyhow, but he's at this, it's an academic conference. This Fearless Among Peers video is distilled from an academic conference. And Sam Harris is the most unknown person there. And you have people like Richard Dawkins was there, Neil deGrasse Tyson was there, Lawrence Krauss was there. This is, again, 10 years ago at least. And everyone who got up and spoke during this conference was like, hello, I'm Arundi Banerjee. I'm in the Department of Psychiatry at Harvard. Hi, I'm person X from Yale, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But Sam got up there and he spoke those things at that conference, and they were really... those things really caught me, and I would recommend to anyone listening to what was the name of the conference? From the Science Network guy, the British dude. I forget. I'll post it anyway. But to see these exceptionally learned people, they're talking about, they are, look, there's a physicist talking about physics. There's Steven Weinberg, the Nobel laureate in physics, talking about religion and physics. And one of the most memorable things was there's a woman who teaches in the Department of Psychology at Harvard, whose name I'm also going to forget. But she says at one point, she asks the people on the panel at the conference, she says, what can we do? And the whole point of this conference was scientists speaking about religion, like the relationship between God or religion and science.
Yeah.
And what she said at one point is, here's the problem. We know all of the reasons that people should think critically about X or Y or Z, whatever. But we're not the best people. That is the academics in the room, the prominent academics. We're not the people best suited to deliver that message to the masses. What do we do? Like, do we hire a PR firm and craft that message? Like, how do you go about getting that out there when we're not professional talkers, even though a lot of us teach in front of a classroom, but we're not public intellectuals in that way, speaking to the masses in a way that Sam Harris does now. So what do we do? And I thought that was such a great question to ask, because it really hopefully makes our fellow atheists ponder, and Peter, you've already pondered this because you do it all the time, and Ood, you do it on your podcast, obviously, but her question, how do we do this, should hopefully nudge some or all of us to ask, what can I do? What can I do to add to the conversation or support the conversation or be a shoulder for someone to lean on when they're having questions about their faith? Or, I imagine, Ood, when you were going through your kind of breakup with your family, your friends got you through that, right? And how do we be better friends to those people who are going through what you went through? Anyway, I'm sorry to blather. That was my blathering.
No, that made total sense, and it's a very important puzzle that we have to solve if we want, like, if we want to stay online and argue, like, so be it. But if we want to win, that battle for hearts and minds, we're gonna have to figure out how exactly to do that, because like. The people on the other side, they're fucking fantastic at winning hearts and minds. They can sway people over, like they've done it for thousands of years. Like they have like the answer to your eternal mortality, like on a string dangling as bait. Like they have people who sit in like imperial palaces in Rome to say, like, look at our guy over there. Like we're definitely a big serious deal. You should believe us. Like that's a lot to compete against, and we have to figure out how to reach people. And like you said, like having a voice and speaking out in your own way is very important, because like when somebody changes their mind, it often isn't like the first time they've heard the thing that they changed their mind about.
No.
Sometimes it's the 10th or 50th or 100th. And sometimes that last time that makes them finally change their mind, it's put in a way that relates to them in just a way that clicks that switch in their mind. And that might not come from a professor or a doctor. That might just come from the school janitor, might be the guy who's able to reach somebody when nobody else can.
Excellent point. Excellent points, Ood. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Peter, did you want to get in on this?
Yeah, I think we all need to chip in. It's what I've been saying since I've been doing this. We're pretty much all going to make a tiny ripple. If we make enough ripples, we'll get a wave, and that's why I keep supporting other channels. Sometimes I support other channels to where my channel is hurting because I don't have enough time, but it is what it is. I mean, I think having the conversation is important, and trying to have the conversation with theists is important. And the more people we can get to do that, because different people will need different approaches. And as I said, the more people we can get to do that, I think the better we will be in the end.
When Ood was talking just now, Ood, you reminded me of something that I realize now maybe it was a repressed memory, but there was one time in one of my classes when I said previously that I think my students could infer my atheism, but I've never really said anything about it. There was a there was a day, there was this really, really smart guy in one of my classes. It was a first year class, and he was super smart. And it emerged, I can't remember what we were discussing, but it emerged that he's pretty religious. And I know that following his first year at this university, he transferred to a Bible college. And I've heard from him a couple times since. Nice guy, great guy.
Mm-hmm.
But we were talking about whatever, and he started to talk about his faith a bit. And I didn't push back and say, you're full of shit, because as the person at the front of the room, you have to be very careful about what you say, because there is a power dynamic there, right? So you have to be very careful about shutting people up, I guess is the way I'll say it. But he got talking about his belief, and he mentioned some religious event, and I said, well, I think you don't want to confuse the famous line from that guy who asked a question about what lines we fall back on. I said, you don't want to fall into the trap of confusing causation and correlation. And he said, what do you mean? And I told him. Then he said, well, I have a friend who was diagnosed terminal cancer. He was dying, brain tumor. That was it for him. And he prayed and prayed and prayed, and we all prayed around him, and he is now cancer-free. So what else could have done that? And I'll call the guy Mike. I don't remember his name. I said, but Mike, he was still getting medicine. He's getting medical treatment during this time. It's like, yeah. But it wasn't until people started praying that it really worked. And then I asked him at one point, I said, does your friend have a favorite television show? And he said, yeah, his favorite show is, I don't know, The Walking Dead or something. And I said, he watches it regularly? Yes. And I just said, how do you know that watching The Walking Dead didn't cure his cancer then? Prayer was going on. The Walking Dead was going on. He ate mushrooms occasionally. Which one of these things actually did it? And the guy was good enough to say, I didn't really think about it. I've never thought about it that way, but he said, I still believe in prayer. And then a woman in the very front row of that class, who hardly ever spoke, said the line that we all know. She said, hey, nothing fails like prayer. And I looked at her and she looked at me, and we had this moment of recognizing, oh yeah, we are on the same wavelength here. Yeah. But it's difficult. One of the reasons that I wanted to have you on with us, Ood, is to talk about, so that we could talk about, and there's a generational divide at play here, of course, and there's also a power differential play here to some extent, in that when you were a student at this university, you had much less perceived power than I did as an instructor. And what's interesting about that, at least for me, is that in some respects, it's, I don't want to say easier, but it's less dangerous for a student to do the things that you've done than for a prof to attempt to do the things that you've done. If a prof had set up the Hug an Atheist booth, holy shit, we'd be having a completely different conversation. Don't you think, Ood, or not?
Yeah, that depending on the temperament of the career, and if any department directors have a stick in their butt, that could be career altering,
Yeah, dude, I found out a few years ago that one of probably my best friend in my department, believes in the young Earth, and I'm just like, dude, you have a PhD from a world-renowned school, and you still don't believe in evolution? He said, nope. And we just said, okay, let's talk about the Toronto Raptors or something, because it was obvious we were not going to have a useful conversation about the age of the Earth and his God. So
yeah, and it always makes you skeptical when they pull somebody with a PhD on a program to speak authoritatively on something. It's like, right. Okay, but is that in your purview?
Right.
Or are you just a guy in a big white coat that looks good on TV? I don't know.
It's funny. I've been thinking for a little while now about starting a podcast of my own, and I think I have a really, really good idea for a podcast, which I'm not going to share for now. But I spent a couple of weeks thinking, what is something that I actually know enough about that I can do maybe a weekly podcast? And I thought of things like, I thought I could do an atheism thing, but nah, lots of people are doing that, and I don't want to distract from what my friends are doing in any way. But I eventually happened upon an idea that I think is saleable broadly. And to get back to how our lead into this kind of finding a way to sell what we're selling in a way that makes it, I think you used the word palatable earlier, Ood, to make that more palatable to people. That's a real challenge, a real hard challenge. Not least because we're working with people, as we said at the beginning of this shit show, that we're dealing with people who can't get out of their lane, and can't hear things from outside their lane. Like, they hear the noise, but they don't process the meaning.
Yeah, like some people don't care about how a car works. They just care about if it runs or not. And like it takes a lot of effort for you to like have them like have the energy or the will to care about if that car works. Like they may be following on a life path, like believing in a religion or like believing in something illogical, and like they're just busy like doing what they do with that belief, and they might not care that it's not like logical on the inside. And it's hard to reach them sometimes.
Awesome analogy, because how often when you're driving your car, Ood or Peter, do you think, okay, I must remove my foot from the brake now and step on the acceleration pedal now? Like, we don't think that, right? We just do it. And it's the same way with at least Christian apologetics and most other sort of, I don't want to say most, a lot of other religiously based statements, beliefs, ideologies, approaches, all that kind of shit.
Yeah.
So
But
totally with you.
But like it's hard having like standards, because like I don't know if you're like I know, but like I don't know if you have similar feelings to I do, but like when I say things like we have to make it more palatable to appeal to people, like on some level, like it feels icky, like it feels dishonest on some small level. Like even though like I'm a rhetorician, like I don't have enough education to like speak authoritatively on stuff, but I can rhetorically deliver complicated subjects like in an effective way.
That's your podcast.
Yeah, but like sometimes I feel like dishonest doing it, because I don't know, like making it palatable. Like like I used the word marketing earlier, and that's kind of exactly what I'm doing. But like I don't like marketing that much either, you know.
So is it that you're worried that you're dumbing it down, and that that you're almost pandering? Because Christopher Hitchens has this thing. He's talk about that one of the ways that religion gets into underprivileged communities is precisely by talking down to them and giving them not just a simple but an oversimplified account of belief, religion, reality, or whatever. So are you worried that are you worried about being perceived to be talking down to people who don't have the nuanced understanding that you have? Is that your
I suppose that's part of it, especially when I talk about like social issues. Like if I ever get into like topics that like surround around critical race theory, or like if I talk about like bigotry and racism and stuff like that, like to somebody, like it can come off very preachy. I feel to somebody like who isn't used to like those kind of conversations. I guess that's part of my worry.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, you become the thing you hate in a way.
Yeah.
Okay, we're coming up on an hour and a half.
My heavens!
We reached an hour and a half.
Peter, we just started. What are you talking about?
It happens every single time.
It does, doesn't it?
And I'm really bad at keeping that particular time limit. But we did have another question in the chat for our guest. But I think it might be one that we all want to chime in on. It's from the EA show, Khalil Allah. He said, "Question for the guest: do you believe that there's something that something is eternal, that is the causal principle for the existence of the universe. And then he elaborated and said, asking about a necessary being, not just the cause of the universe. So we'll let Ood go first, and then if we want to chime in, we'll do that after.
I think they lost me a little bit on the clarification that it has to be a being, but
Right.
like but I suppose like there could be something that is causal and eternal, like I've only read a little bit about string theory and about like certain elements and certain like particles emerging out of like this
Yep. Nothing.
this vibration of super tiny like metaphysical strings. Like that seems like it could like go past or live beyond like a big bang. Like that might live beyond the realms of time, matter, and energy. Maybe that's causally principle. But even string theory is at this point mostly mathematical. Like it's mostly theoretical. So I would say like there might be some physical processes or particles that can like exist eternally in the universe, but I don't think we have any like solid proof. Like as far as I know, even protons have a half-life. It's long, but it has a half-life.
It's
You know?
long. Yeah.
Okay, Flynn, want to chime in?
This is, that's a version of the boilerplate, and that's a version of Darth Dawkins's fundamentally absolute and non-contingent. And my answer to this, and I don't know, I'd have to talk to a professional philosopher to see if this is even a good answer. But if Darth were to posit what is fundamentally, and do you believe that there's something fundamentally absolute and non-contingent that instantiates all reality? I would say yes. And that thing, I'm with you, Ood, 100%. Once I heard the word being in the explanation, I was like, okay, you lost me. Like you lose us at being. There's no way of deriving a being from this kind of
I have
this kind of lazy version of the Kalam cosmological argument. But I'll just say really quickly, Peter.
Yeah, he put in a clarification for the being. He said with being just means existence in philosophy.
Something that exists. Like this pen exists, so this is being. Okay. Anyhow, my answer is the same. I don't know if it's philosophically strong, weak, or whatever, but I'd say this. Yes, there is something that is fundamentally absolute and non-contingent that undergirds all reality, and that thing is the universe. If the option is between the universe and a being or a god, a deity, I'm going with the universe every time for the simple reason that I have evidence of one of those things. I know that there's a universe. I have no evidence to support the God proposition. So my answer, I hope it answers the EA person's question, is yeah, there's something that underwrites all of our present reality, and it is reality itself. It is the universe. And don't get into these bullshit ticky-tack attempts, gish-galloping about, well, what about physical laws? Does the universe create the laws? No, men do. But fuck that bullshit. If it's down to me, there are two options. It's a universe and all that entails, or it's a God. Well, I got evidence of a universe. I'm going with the universe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like the universe is like, it's the set that contains all other sets. So if there's something eternal and causal, then it's going to be in there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. If it is a series of bangs and busts, then that's all still the universe, or at least the cosmos.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I need to chime in on this, for one, I think the universe that we find ourselves in is eternal. I'm not sure that it needed a cause, because there are particles that come in and go out of existence all the time, and I forgot the name, so my friend Leophilius will probably rip me a new one for still not remembering this. But they don't seem to have a cause for coming into existence, going out of existence. So I don't see that the universe existing needs to have a cause.
Yeah.
And I also don't think that there's something that it needs to be grounded in. If anything, it needs to be grounded in reality. And for me, reality also is eternal. And if a God would exist, then he would be dependent on reality. Because if he's not part of reality, then he's not existing. So that would be my answer. We'll have to take that up with cosmologists. I recently did a show for Arn Ra where he had, and now I forgot his name. I just had it. John Carroll.
Oh, he had Sean Carroll on?
Yes, and so
awesome.
Sean Carroll is not a big proponent of the whole Big Bang theory. So right. and it seems there are more and more cosmologists who think different about that. So, well, I don't think we have an answer yet. We can't look past Planck time, and so for me at least, it would be dishonest to assume something that we can't investigate, and that is my stance, and probably will be. We're going to go to the last question, and then we really need to wrap it up. And the last question comes from Iron Charioteer, and it's also for our guest. Could you design a universe, Ood? If you could design a universe, would it be the one we are currently in?
Oh, I love what this question implies at, because I've used this argument like in the past. Like, I'm not a pinnacle of morality. Like, I'm not the best guy out there. Like, I'm selfish sometimes, and sometimes I'm a bonehead, and sometimes I'm an asshole. Like, I'm not, but like a lot of times I'm more moral than a lot of systems gods. Like, I think I could design a better universe than a lot of systems gods. Like, if I could roll the dice again, do you think I would put flesh-eating virus? Do you think I'd put birth defects back in there? Do you think I would just like roll the like if I had total knowledge of all the universe, if I had the same powers of God, that I could see the consequences of all my actions before I even rolled them? Would I let's roll up a bunch of apes who are going to put themselves in income inequality and ruin the planet with climate change? Let's do that. Like, no, why would I do that? So I think I could design a better system if I had the same tools as God did.
Yeah, and I'd fully agree with that myself. Yeah. So, so as I said, we really need to wrap it up, because I want this to be accessible for people, and if we go on too long, less people will just come on and watch the show. I want to thank you, Flynn, for being here as my co-host for the very first time. It's still awesome to have you back, and even better to have you on our show.
Great to be welcome back.
Thanks for coming on and for a great chat. Do you have any last words?
No, I really like what you guys are doing here. I had a great time here, and I hope this show blows up, because I've watched a few of your episodes, and like you guys have discussions that I've missed. Like it rings of like some hangouts I've had in like 2012, 13, 14, 15, that area, and it's a good feeling. So I hope you guys keep on doing this. I really like the show.
Great, thanks. That's what we're here for.
That's right.
I was typing in the chat, so I'll do that. People in the chat, stick around. I got a last message. So that was it for today.
Thank you, Ood. Thank you.
There are a few more chats planned already. One that I'm looking forward to is we will have Ken Miller on the show sometime soon. So that's one that I'm really looking forward to. On Raw will be back soon, and we've got a few theists that want to come on. So looks like we're set for a few more shows. And if you want to come on, everything is down there in the description. Shoot us a DM or an email, and we'll be happy to have you on. So thanks, guys, and we'll see
Thank
you all
you.
next time.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Thanks,
Have a good
Ood.
night.